The world watched in disbelief as Russian forces surged across the Ukrainian border on February 24, 2022. The invasion marked a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between the two nations, sending shockwaves through the international community. Missiles rained down on strategic targets across Ukraine, from Odessa to Kharkiv. The relentless bombardment left cities in ruins and civilians in a state of panic, seeking shelter wherever they could find it. The capital, Kyiv, braced for an onslaught. Ukrainian soldiers hastily prepared defenses while the haunting sound of air raid sirens filled the air, signaling the imminent danger. Putin's stated objectives, the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, were met with international condemnation. Leaders around the world denounced the invasion, calling it a blatant violation of international law and an affront to global peace. Amidst the chaos, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emerged as a beacon of defiance. His addresses to the nation were filled with resolve and determination, inspiring his fellow citizens to stand firm against the aggressors. Shedding his suit for military fatigue, Zelensky rallied his people and became the face of Ukrainian resistance. His presence on the front lines and his unwavering commitment to his country galvanized the Ukrainian spirit. His unwavering courage resonated globally, galvanizing international support for Ukraine. Protests erupted worldwide, with people taking to the streets to show their solidarity with the Ukrainian cause. The reality was stark. Putin had unleashed his forces, and the world was left to grapple with the consequences. The invasion not only threatened the sovereignty of Ukraine, but also posed a significant challenge to the international order, leaving nations to ponder their next steps in this unfolding crisis.
Check.
The initial shock of the invasion was compounded by a series of miscalculations on the part of NATO and its allies. These miscalculations ranged from underestimating the resilience of the Russian economy to overestimating the effectiveness of their own sanctions. The anticipated economic collapse of Russia, triggered by Western sanctions, failed to materialize. Instead, the Russian financial system adapted, finding new ways to circumvent the restrictions imposed by the West. While the Russian economy felt the sting, it proved more resilient than predicted. Domestic industries ramped up production, and the government implemented measures to stabilize the economy, ensuring that the impact of sanctions was mitigated. Contrary to expectations, Russia's economy managed modest growth, buoyed by soaring energy prices. The global demand for oil and gas provided Russia with a steady stream of revenue, which helped to offset the economic pressures. The expected swift victory for Ukrainian forces never came to pass. Despite initial successes, Ukrainian troops faced fierce resistance, and the conflict dragged on longer than anyone had anticipated. What began as a blitzkrieg quickly bogged down into a grinding war of attrition. Both sides dug in, leading to prolonged and devastating battles that took a heavy toll on soldiers and civilians alike. Putin, far from being isolated, deepened ties with non-Western powers. He leveraged these relationships to secure economic and military support, ensuring that Russia remained a formidable player on the global stage. China provided Russia with diplomatic cover and economic lifelines. Through strategic partnerships and trade agreements, China helped to alleviate some of the economic pressures faced by Russia, further complicating the geopolitical landscape. These miscalculations would have lasting consequences for the conflict and the broader international system. The unexpected turns in the conflict reshaped alliances, altered economic strategies, and left an indelible mark on global politics. Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer, approached the Ukraine conflict with a calculated strategy. His approach can be characterized by three key elements: nuclear rhetoric, economic reorientation, and diplomatic patience. Putin's nuclear saber-rattling served as an effective deterrent against direct NATO intervention. Simultaneously, Putin orchestrated a strategic shift in Russia's economic orientation. Oil and gas, once destined for Europe, flowed increasingly towards China and India. Trade with BRICS nations expanded significantly. Underpinning these moves was Putin's characteristic diplomatic patience. He anticipated that Western resolve would eventually waver, creating opportunities for him to exploit. However, the long-term costs and consequences of this high-stakes gamble remain to be seen. The initial shock of Russia's invasion exposed shortcomings in NATO's strategic posture. One key failure was NATO's inability to deter Putin in the first place. The alliance's tepid response to Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea emboldened Putin. This lack of decisive action contributed to the current crisis. However, as the conflict evolved, NATO took steps to bolster its presence in Eastern Europe. The establishment of the NATO-Ukraine Council in 2023 signifies a deepening of ties. NATO has pledged billions in military and financial assistance to Ukraine.
The reverberations of the Ukraine conflict extend far beyond the battlefields of Eastern Europe. The conflict has exposed vulnerabilities in critical supply chains and fueled inflationary pressures. One of the most immediate impacts has been on global energy markets. Russia, a major energy exporter, found itself increasingly isolated from Western markets. This disruption led to a surge in oil and gas prices, hitting consumers worldwide. The conflict also disrupted global food supplies. Ukraine, known as the breadbasket of Europe, is a major exporter of wheat and corn. Beyond economic impacts, the conflict has fueled political instability within Western nations. Rising inflation has eroded living standards and fueled social unrest. As the conflict in Ukraine grinds on, the path ahead remains shrouded in uncertainty. One possibility is a negotiated settlement, though it faces significant hurdles. Key sticking points include the status of the Donbas region and Crimea's future. Another scenario is a protracted war of attrition, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. This scenario carries significant risks, including continued human suffering and economic damage. A third concerning scenario is a widening of the conflict, drawing in NATO directly. The potential for such a scenario underscores the need for clear communication and de-escalatory measures. Ethical considerations loom large, demanding careful reflection on the use of force and its consequences. The Ukraine conflict has already left an indelible mark on the international system. The reverberations of this conflict are being felt far beyond the borders of Ukraine, affecting global politics, economics, and security dynamics. It has shattered the illusion of a post-Cold War peace in Europe and exposed the limitations of existing security architectures. The fragile balance that once held Europe together is now under severe strain, revealing the cracks in alliances and treaties that were thought to be robust. Putin's ultimate endgame in Ukraine remains a subject of intense debate. Is it a quest for regional dominance, a strategic move to reassert Russia's influence, or a deeper ideological battle against Western encroachment? Some analysts believe his goal is to subjugate Ukraine entirely, turning it into a vassal state under Russian control. This would not only expand Russia's territory, but also send a clear message to other former Soviet states. Others argue that his aims are more limited, seeking to weaken NATO's influence in Eastern Europe. By creating instability, Putin could deter NATO expansion and maintain a buffer zone around Russia. The conflict has also exposed the limitations of the existing international order. Institutions that were designed to maintain global peace and security are struggling to adapt to the new realities of power politics and regional conflicts. The United Nations Security Council has proven ineffective in addressing the crisis. Veto powers and geopolitical rivalries have paralyzed its ability to act decisively, raising questions about its future relevance. The world is witnessing the emergence of a more multipolar system, with rising powers challenging the United States' global leadership. As new alliances form and old ones fracture, the global order is being reshaped in ways that are still unfolding.